The laughter reached him before the bell finished ringing. It wasn't loud enough to be stopped, not sharp enough to be punished. Just a thin ripple of amusement spreading through the bidding hall as if his presence itself were a misunderstanding everyone shared. The Omega stood on the platform with his hands folded at his waist, head slightly bowed, not in submission, but in practice. Linen robes hung too loosely from his frame. His wrists were bare, his scent barely registered, diluted to the point of accusation. Beside him, a metal placard caught the light. Defective. Low value. He didn't read it. He remembered it. In his first life, this had been the moment the floor seemed to tilt, when hope thinned into something brittle and embarrassing. He remembered the pause after the opening bid, the way silence had stretched until it became verdict. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "We will begin at—" No hands rose. The Omega breathed in slowly, carefully, the way one learns to do when reacting only makes things worse. Rebirth didn't erase reflexes, it only sharpened them. He knew better than to look desperate. Omegas who looked desperate were treated as disposable. Whispers slid through the tiers of seats. "That's the useless one. They say his heat never stabilizes. Why would anyone waste coin on that?" He kept his gaze fixed just past the edge of the platform. Last time, someone had laughed louder. Last time, an alpha had joked about breaking him in properly. Last time, the bell had rung twice before anyone bothered to end it. The bell rang again. Still nothing. The Omega felt the familiar weight settle into his chest. Not surprise, not even pain. Just confirmation. Fate repeating itself with bureaucratic efficiency. Then the air changed. Not sound. Pressure. A subtle tightening, as if the room itself had drawn a breath. From the highest tier, where shadows pooled behind black stone screens, 3 figures sat unmoving. The Triplet Alpha King and his brothers. In his first life, he had never made it this far. He'd been dismissed early, sold cheaply, forgotten quickly. This time, he felt their attention before he dared to name it. The auctioneer hesitated. "If there are no bids, we will—" A single hand rose, gloved, unhurried, final. The hall froze. Gasps broke the silence like fractures. Someone swore softly, someone else laughed, then stopped. The Omega's heart stuttered, not with hope, but with memory, because he remembered what came after being chosen by monsters, and because this time it was the cursed Triplet Alpha King who had raised his hand for him. The bell struck once, hard, and the Omega understood with a clarity that felt almost merciful. Fate hadn't spared him. It had noticed him. The hall did not recover quickly. People stared as if the raised hand might retract itself, as if the bell might apologize and reverse its sound. The auctioneer swallowed, glanced once toward the black stone tier, then announced the winning bid with a voice too tight to be confident. The cursed Triplet Alpha King. No titles spoken aloud, no honorifics needed. Power did not require repetition. The Omega felt the shift immediately. Guards moving closer, posture changing, the room reordering itself around a decision it had not expected to witness. In his first life, this was where the humiliation had ended. He had been led away through a side door, unnamed, unremembered. This time, the path opened forward. He kept his eyes lowered as protocol demanded, but inside, his thoughts moved quickly. The king had never chosen before. Not him. Not anyone like him. The stories were consistent on that point. Omegas brought to the palace did not stay, and those taken by the triplets were never seen again. A curse that burned through bonds, a lineage that did not keep what it touched. The Omega's pulse steadied. Fear was familiar, surprise was not. As he was escorted down from the platform, he felt it again, that pressure, closer now. One of the triplets watched him without disguise, gaze sharp and assessing. Another did not look at him at all. The third was the one whose hand had risen. The king did not look at him. That somehow was worse. They moved him through corridors too clean to echo, past doors that closed without sound. No one spoke to him, no one explained. He was not thanked for his compliance or warned of his fate. He was treated like a fact already settled. In his first life, he had begged here, softly, politely. He remembered the way the words had tasted, thin, useless. This time, he said nothing. The transport waited, black and sealed, its interior dim and scent neutral. As the door slid shut, the Omega allowed himself one small, private certainty. Whatever this was, it was already wrong. The king had never chosen. Not then, not now. Which meant this wasn't mercy, it was interruption. And as the vehicle began to move, the Omega closed his eyes and wondered, not for the first time, what kind of fate changes its mind, only to make sure you notice. The doors closed behind him without a sound. Not a slam, not a warning. Just a quiet finality that settled into the room like dust. The Omega stood where he had been left, hands folded again out of habit, listening to the absence of instructions. This place was not a dungeon. That unsettled him more than chains ever had. The chamber was large, deliberately sparse, stone walls warmed by hidden lighting. No visible restraints, no guards in sight. Comfort designed to feel optional, power that did not need to announce itself. In his first life, this had been where fear sharpened into panic, where he had tried to please without knowing the rules, where he had mistaken silence for patience. This time, he observed. Footsteps approached, measured, unhurried. One of the triplets entered first, not the king. This brother's gaze flicked over the Omega once, quick and precise, before moving to the seals along the walls. Checking, verifying. "You'll stay here," he said. "No threat, no softness. You're not to leave without escort." The Omega nodded once, not gratitude, not submission, understanding. The Alpha paused, as if expecting something more, a question, a tremor. When none came, his brow furrowed briefly before he turned and left. Another presence lingered after, the second brother. He did not step fully into the room. He watched from the threshold, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, with something like calculation. The Omega felt the weight of it along his spine. "Don't test him," the Alpha said quietly, even unintentionally. The Omega met his gaze for the first time. "I won't," he replied. The Alpha studied him, then inclined his head once. Respect, perhaps? Or caution? Then he was gone too. Only then did the king enter. He did not fill the doorway. He did not crowd the space. He simply appeared, as if the room had made space for him without being asked. His gaze settled on the Omega, not hungry, not cold, intent. "You are under my protection," the king said. The words landed heavily. Protection was not kindness. It was ownership without intimacy. The Omega lowered his head again. "I understand." The king watched him a moment longer, as if weighing something unspoken. Then he turned away, leaving the door open behind him. Bought was not the same as claimed, and as the Omega listened to the retreating footsteps, one truth settled quietly into place. This time, the cage was wider, and that made it more dangerous. Night came without darkness, the chamber lights dimmed by degrees, as if even time here moved carefully. The Omega sat on the edge of the bed he had not been told he could use, hands resting on his knees, listening to the building breathe around him. In his first life, this had been the night the pain began. Not claws, not violence. Something quieter, a pressure in the chest that felt like drowning without water. A heat that never peaked, never broke, just lingered until his body forgot how to ask for relief. They had called it incompatibility, a polite word for erasure. He pressed his fingers into the linen now, grounding himself. Rebirth had given him memory, not immunity. Already he felt it, an echo beneath his skin, a low vibration that hadn't been there before the bidding. The curse. Everyone spoke of it like a rumor sharpened by fear. Omegas brought into the Triplet King's territory didn't scream. They didn't die dramatically. They simply faded. Bonds that never formed. Heats that turned corrosive. Bodies that failed quietly enough to be blamed. In his first life, he had thought it was because he was defective. Now, he wasn't so sure. The pressure grew when the king entered the wing. The Omega didn't see him. He felt him, the air tightening, his breath catching halfway in, as if something unseen had wrapped gently but firmly around his lungs. He had felt this before, too late. Last time, he had collapsed on the third night, alone, unwitnessed. The official record had listed complications. No fault assigned, no questions asked. His nails bit into his palm as understanding crept in, slow and unwelcome. The curse hadn't reacted to dominance, it had reacted to proximity. To him. The door across the chamber opened. One of the brothers stepped in, eyes immediately narrowing as he took in the Omega's rigid posture. "You feel it," the Alpha said quietly. The Omega nodded once. Honesty cost less than denial now. "It's early," the Alpha muttered, more to himself than to the Omega. "It's never this fast." That confirmed it. Something was wrong. Not with the curse, but with the pattern. When the Alpha left, the Omega leaned forward, breathing shallowly, piecing together the truth his first life hadn't given him time to reach. If the curse followed him across lives, if it awakened when the king was near, then this wasn't punishment, it was recognition, and whatever fate he had been reborn into, it was already reaching for him again. The room changed the moment he stopped speaking, not dramatically, not loudly. It was subtler than that, like the air itself leaning in. The Omega realized it only when his own breathing felt too loud in his ears. Every inhale scraped his ribs, every exhale felt like a confession. Around him, the bidding hall continued its low murmur, wealth shifting in silk seats, bored cruelty disguised as interest. But their space had gone still. The Triplet Alpha King had not spoken. That was the problem. 3 thrones sat elevated above the bidders, carved from black stone veined with gold. All 3 were occupied, yet it felt like one presence wearing 3 bodies. The center Alpha, crown unadorned, expression unreadable, had gone quiet. His brothers mirrored him, heads slightly tilted, eyes no longer on the crowd. They were watching the Omega, not with hunger, not with disgust, with recognition. The Omega lowered his gaze, fingers curling into the thin fabric of his sleeves. He had learned early that silence could be armor, that if he made himself small enough, useless enough, the pain passed faster. The crowd had already decided his value: defective, cursed, unsellable. Their laughter still rang in his ears. Useless Omegas didn't survive auctions. Cursed ones disappeared. A bidder scoffed aloud. "Why is he still standing?" Another laughed. "Even the curse doesn't want him." The words should have slid off him. He was used to this. But something inside his chest shifted, sharp and sudden, like a lock turning where there had never been a door before. The mark on his wrist, long faded, long dormant, burned. Across the hall, the Triplet King's hand tightened on the armrest. Just once. The Alpha on the left leaned in slightly, not toward the Omega, toward his brother. A silent question. The Alpha on the right stilled, jaw flexing, as if restraining something old and violent. Still, no one spoke. The auctioneer cleared his throat, uneasy. "If there are no further bids, we will—" The Omega swayed. Not from weakness, from pressure. It pressed against his senses, against the fragile walls he'd built since his last life ended screaming. Power rolled off the dais in controlled waves, ancient and restrained, brushing his skin like a warning rather than a threat. His knees threatened to buckle. Before they could— The center Alpha raised his hand. The hall froze. Gasps rippled outward, disbelief crashing through the room. Heads turned, whispers ignited like sparks in dry grass. "The king? For that Omega? Is he mad?" The auctioneer stammered. Your Majesty, are you certain? The curse—" "I am aware," the Alpha said calmly. His voice did something to the Omega's bones, settled them, claimed them. The mark on the Omega's wrist flared hot, then cold. Rebirth memories slammed into him without mercy. Blood on marble, a crown falling, 3 shadows standing over him as he died unafraid. The Alpha King finally looked directly at him, not down, not through, at. And in that gaze was not ownership. It was inevitability. As the hammer fell and the room erupted, the Omega understood too late. Silence hadn't protected him. It had summoned them. The chains came off without ceremony. That was the first wrong thing. No ritual blade, no Alpha branding, no public declaration of ownership. The guards simply unlocked the restraints and stepped back, eyes averted, as if instinct told them not to interfere with what followed. The Omega staggered forward once, then steadied. The hall remained frozen. No one spoke. No one dared. The triplet Alpha King descended from the dais alone. Each step echoed too loudly in the Omega's ears, syncing with the pulse burning at his wrist. The curse mark no longer hurt. It waited. Up close, the king was worse than terrifying. He was controlled. Power lived in the stillness of him, in the way his shoulders didn't tense, in the way his gaze never rushed. His brothers remained behind, flanking the throne like sentinels, but their attention never left the Omega, not for a breath. "You remember?" the king said. It wasn't a question. The Omega swallowed. His throat felt tight, raw with old screams. "I remember dying." A ripple passed through the room. Not sound, but pressure. Several alphas shifted uncomfortably. An Omega sobbed somewhere in the crowd and was quickly silenced. The king's eyes darkened just slightly. "That wasn't your end." Memory cracked open. Cold stone beneath his back. Blood pooling under his spine. 3 shadows kneeling, not to finish him, but to hold him steady. He had laughed then, breathless and broken, and said something he'd never understood until now. "I'll come back wrong." The Omega's knees buckled. Hands caught him before he hit the floor. Strong, steady, familiar. The king knelt with him, one arm braced around his back, the other gripping his wrist, not restraining, anchoring. The curse mark flared fully, light crawling up the Omega's veins like veins of molten silver. The hall erupted into chaos. "That's impossible. The curse is activating. Kill him before—" "Enough." The king didn't raise his voice. The sound cut through everything. The curse surged, then stilled. The Omega gasped, breath tearing back into his lungs as if he'd been underwater for lifetimes. His body shook, not from fear, but from the violent rearranging of something fundamental. The king leaned in close, forehead nearly touching his. "They told you the curse destroyed everything it touched." "Yes," the Omega whispered. "They lied." The brothers approached at last. One crouched, fingers hovering just short of the Omega's shoulder, waiting for permission that never came. Another stood guard, eyes scanning the hall with open threat. "What does the curse do?" the Omega asked. The king's grip tightened, just enough to be felt. "It remembers what the world tries to erase." The Omega laughed weakly. It broke into a sob he couldn't stop. Around them, bidders backed away. Contracts were abandoned. Guards hesitated, torn between orders and instinct. No one wanted to be the one who interfered with a rebirth already in motion. The king rose, pulling the Omega with him. "Take him," someone shouted. "Before it finishes—" The king turned. For the first time, his restraint cracked. "This," he said softly, "is the finishing." The lights shattered overhead. Darkness slammed down, thick and absolute. And in it, the Omega felt the curse settle fully into place. No longer a wound, no longer a sentence, but a bond awakening. Darkness didn't last. It fractured, splintering into torchlight and shouting as emergency sigils flared to life along the auction hall walls. Shadows recoiled. The curse mark dimmed from silver fire to a quiet, living glow beneath the Omega's skin. He was still standing. That alone should have been impossible. The triplet Alpha King did not release him. One hand remained firm at the Omega's back, fingers splayed as if holding a fragile structure together. The other lifted slowly, palm outward, not in threat, but command. "Stand down," he said. The guards hesitated. They had been trained to obey the crown. They had also been trained to fear the curse. Right now, those instincts were at war. One stepped forward anyway. "Your Majesty, the Omega is unstable. The rebirth—" "I know exactly what this is." The king's voice hardened, edged with something old, something personal. His brothers moved without instruction. One positioned himself between the guards and the Omega, stance loose but lethal. The other shut the massive hall doors with a single, decisive motion. The sound boomed like a verdict. The Omega's head swam. Too much air, too many eyes. He felt wrong inside his body, lighter, sharper, as if parts of him had finally been aligned after lifetimes bent out of shape. "Why am I still alive?" he asked hoarsely. The king looked down at him, not like an asset, not like a curse, like an answer. "Because you were never meant to be broken," he said. "You were meant to return." Murmurs surged again, angry now, fearful. Return as what? Someone shouted. A weapon? The king turned toward the crowd at last. His gaze swept over the bidders, the nobles, the observers who had laughed when the Omega's name was called. When his eyes settled, men shrank. Alphas stiffened. Omegas lowered their heads. Look carefully, the king said. This is what your system tried to erase. He drew the Omega closer, not possessive, protective. You call him useless because he does not submit the way you expect, the king continued. You call him cursed because you fear what survives death. Silence fell again. He had it now. Their attention, their unease. The king raised his hand. Every alpha in the room felt it, pressure slamming into their chests, forcing their instincts to heal. This was not dominance flared for spectacle. This was authority exercised without effort. I revoke the auction, he said. All contracts, all bids. Outrage erupted instantly. You can't. The council will. The curse. The king didn't let them finish. I claim him. The words landed heavy, final. The Omega's breath hitched. His mind raced, searching for the trap. Claims came with chains, with rules, with ownership dressed up as protection. The king felt the tension in him and spoke again, lower this time. Only for him. This is not possession, he said. This is acknowledgement. The Omega searched his face, really looked. There was no hunger there, no triumph, only certainty. What happens if I refuse? The Omega asked. For the first time, something like pain crossed the king's expression. Then I will still tear this system apart, he said quietly, but I will not force you to stand in its ruins with me. The choice pressed down on the Omega's chest, heavier than any chain. He thought of the laughter, the bidding numbers, the years of being told survival was all he was allowed. The curse pulsed once, not in warning, in invitation. The Omega straightened. I don't want to be saved, he said, voice trembling but clear. I want to be seen. The king bowed his head. Then he turned back to the hall, hand rising once more, this time not to command silence, but to deliver judgment. Witness him, he said. And every crown in the room felt, for the first time, afraid. The council chamber was smaller than the auction hall, but it felt heavier. Stone walls, sealed windows, no audience. The Omega stood at the center of it, unbound, unguarded, yet more exposed than he had ever been on the bidding floor. The curse rested quietly beneath his skin now, no longer flaring, no longer screaming, waiting. Across from him, the Triplet Alpha King removed his crown. The sound of it touching the table echoed louder than expected. This is where they decide what to call you, the king said. Survivor, threat, mistake. And what do you call me? The Omega asked. The king didn't answer immediately. His brothers stood behind him, tense but silent. Outside the chamber, arguments bled through the stone, nobles shouting, council members demanding containment, priests insisting the curse should have killed him. The world wanted him categorized. The king met his eyes at last. I call you the proof they were wrong. The council doors burst open before the Omega could respond. Decrees were read, investigations announced. The auction was declared illegal retroactively, as if paperwork could cleanse blood. Several bidders were detained, others vanished before dawn. The Omega listened without reacting. He had learned long ago that justice often arrived too late to matter. When it ended, the chamber emptied just as quickly. No one looked at him as they passed, not in contempt, not in pity, in fear. Alone now, the Omega finally felt the tremor hit his hands. The aftermath always came quietly. He pressed his palms together, grounding himself in the reality of breath, of weight, of being here. I didn't plan for this part, he admitted. The king stepped closer, not crowding, not touching. Neither did I. What happens to me now? The king considered him carefully. That depends on what you want to become after survival. The Omega let out a slow breath. He thought of rebirth as something violent, painful, final. This felt different, like standing in a doorway long avoided. I don't want to disappear again, he said. Not into safety, not into silence. A faint, Fierce smile crossed the king's face. Then stay, he said, not as mine, as yourself. The curse stirred, warm, steady. For the first time, the Omega realized something that made his chest ache. The rebirth hadn't ended in the auction hall, it had only just begun. The capital rebuilt quickly, it always did. Stalls reopened where the auction banners once hung. Stone floors were scrubbed until no one could point to where the Omega had knelt, where laughter had risen, where silence had agreed. But memory is harder to erase than blood. The Omega returned to the hall alone weeks later, dressed plainly, no sigils, no guards. People noticed him anyway. They always did now. Conversations thinned as he passed. Some bowed too deeply. Others didn't bow at all, fear disguised as dignity. At the center of the hall, he stopped. This was where they had called him useless, where they had measured his worth by how little he fought back. He closed his eyes, not to relive it, but to release it. Behind him, footsteps approached, familiar, balanced, 3, moving as one. The Triplet Alpha King did not wear his crown. His brothers did not wear armor. For the first time, they stood not above the room, but within it. You didn't have to come, the Omega said quietly. We did, the king replied. If this place remembers you, it should remember us too. No speeches followed, no declarations, just presence. Word spread anyway, it always did, that the cursed Omega had refused exile, that the Triplet Alpha King had refused ownership. That power, once exposed, had learned restraint or fear. Some nights, the Omega still woke with the echo of the bidding bell in his ears. Some days, the curse pulsed like a second heartbeat, reminding him that rebirth was not a moment, but a practice. He was no longer invisible, and that terrified people far more than his weakness ever had. As he left the hall, he felt it clearly then, the truth no one had dared say out loud. He had never been useless, he had been uncontrollable. And those are the ones history tries to break first. So tell me, if you were in that hall, would you have raised your hand too, or stayed silent like the rest?